Your school may be doing an amazing job with recruiting students, hiring the best teachers, as well as marketing all of the great things that you're doing within the school building. But one of the things that I believe is that experience is the best differentiator to creating magical moments within the classroom, between students and teachers. And experience is the gateway for you being able to increase your educational capacity, but also have a school that people are talking about. Today, I am so excited to have a friend, a mentor, a guide, my guy, Dan, who is an international keynote speaker. And outside of his professional title of a customer experience expert, a Forbes contributor, and a best-selling author, his 20-year professional career, including leadership positions at McDonald's, Discover, and Humana, outside of all of those things, he is someone that has transformed my life from inside and out. He is someone that has helped me approach education in a way of not just looking at data, but how can I show up as my best self professionally and personally so I can create the best possible experiences. So ultimately, I can be an experience maker. Dan, how are you, sir?
Hey, Kyle, that was like the nicest introduction I've ever had. Thank you.
I appreciate you so much, man.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Of course, I know we've known each other for a long time, so we can just have a candid conversation. And I want to start us off with talking about, like, who are you? I know you as Dan, the guy that speaks on national stages, international stages. I know you as the guy that writes books, the family man, but then also the mentor that has helped me in so many different aspects. But how would you describe who you are to people that have never met you?
Uh, you know, it's so funny because speakers like talking about anything except themselves. But I would say, I've been finding my way in this world just like everybody else for a long time. When I graduated college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I literally picked majors just because I thought the classes were interesting, not because I had any pre-professional goals. I kind of fell into marketing as a career and ended up spending 20 years there in corporate America. But it was great. It just wasn't entirely fulfilling, and I kind of knew there was more possible for me. And I ended up working for a couple of bosses, one in particular that really encouraged me to get out there and start speaking. And when I did that, I realized how much I loved it, and I realized how I was inspiring people. And I realized that was what I was meant to do. And so it then took me a little while to extricate myself from corporate America to be able to go do this full time. But man, as soon as I did that, I haven't looked back. And I feel truly blessed to be able to do something that I love every day. And I hope that, all of your viewers and listeners get that at some point in your career. Hopefully it's now, but if not, at some point that you're doing something that you love, because it does make all the difference.
You said earlier in you communicating just kind of your story that you just knew that speaking was what you were supposed to be doing. How did you know? Because there's so many listeners. We have educators, principals, administrators, and then just leaders in mission-driven organizations that are doing work that may be even impactful or paying the bills. But what was the shift inside of you that told you, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I think I actually think it comes from the outside. It comes from the feedback that the universe gives you. When you're talking about teachers, I just flashed back for a moment. When I was much, much younger, I was a camp counselor, and specifically, I was a swimming instructor. So I used to work at the pool every day for a day camp and teach kids how to swim. And I loved it. It was so much fun. And I remember to this day, this one little girl that was a first grader that spent most of the summer sitting on the side of the pool because she was terrified to get in. And every day I would work with her to try to get her in the pool. And every day it was a battle. And by the end of the summer, I got that girl to pass her swimming test.
Wow.
And I remember not only was it such an accomplishment for her, but it felt like such an accomplishment for me, right? Because I was like, I did it. I finally did it. I got this girl to do this. And I've never forgotten about her, even though she's probably married with kids at this point. But that sort of was a moment that I remember in my life that told me, hey, you're a pretty good swimming instructor. Like this is something that you're good at, right? And so you kind of, there's that validation that comes from somebody else. And when I first started speaking, I was working at Discover Card. And the goal at that point, according to my boss, was just to share with the world some of the cool stuff we were doing at Discover. This wasn't my content, it was Discover's content. And I was just the conduit. And what started happening was people would come up to me afterwards and they would say, Dan, I never once in my life thought of applying for a Discover Card, but after hearing you speak so greatly about this company, I'm going to go do that. And I'm like, really? Because it wasn't a sales pitch. Like that wasn't my goal to get you to go apply for a Discover Card. It was to talk about technology and all the cool stuff we were doing. And so again, I took this feedback and I was like, I'm actually able to influence people and they like listening to me. And so then the question is, do I have something to say on my own? Where I'm not talking about the credit card company or any of the other companies I work for. And so like you, I embarked on a journey of creating my own content and my own frameworks. And it helped that I fell in love with customer experience and felt really passionate about it. And particularly as a marketer, I did almost every marketing channel known to man. I literally got my start in direct mail. And then, and my last marketing job was doing social media and pretty much everything in between. And when I started on customer experience, and I realized almost instantly that it was the best marketing I had ever done, that getting your customers to talk about you is so much more powerful than you talking about yourself. And so once I kind of hit on that, I'm like, all right, this is what I want to do. And this is what I love doing. And the speaking part's just the vehicle. It's funny. I talk to a lot of people who want to be speakers. I don't think I was just watching some show recently where they were talking about people's biggest fears. And, there's like spiders, snakes, public speaking, right? And I have found that with public speaking, and I'm guessing that the teachers that they'll react to this because they're in front of, they're public speakers too. They're in front of groups every day, but people are never indifferent about public speaking. They either love it or it is their biggest fear. Nobody is ever like, I do it if I have to. Yeah. And so I happen to be one of those that fell into the category of loving it. And so much so that I don't get nervous before I go on a stage. I get excited. I get pumped. And then that helps me pump up an audience and get them excited. And when I'm having fun, they're having fun. And so even today, I love that validation from the audience that I am giving them something that they want to receive. And then I know I'm doing it right.
Dan, customer experience is one of those terms that is thrown out a lot, especially now, that I don't believe I've ever seen someone define what customer experience really is and how this shows up, whether you're in corporate, whether you're in education, in anything. How would you define what customer experience is and why is it so important?
So my definition is pretty simple. It is how your customers feel every time they interact with you. And there's two parts there. The feeling part's really important because we all know that perception is reality. So if somebody feels that an experience is difficult or confusing or frustrating, then that's what it is. Even if your app designer has told you that they just designed the greatest new app in history, if your customers feel it's confusing, that's the answer, right? So how they feel, and then every single interaction. And this is critical because think about a shopping experience, right? It's not just when you're checking out at the cashier. That's like that's the commerce part of the experience, but it is from the moment you walk in the door, right? Imagine grabbing the door to open up to go to a store and there's gum on the door, or there's fingerprints on the window, or what, again, use your imagination. will filter that. Those start to frame your experience before you even walk in the door. Think about the last time you walked into a fast food restaurant and there's just somebody standing behind the counter and it looks like you're interrupting their otherwise pleasant day by wanting to push you, right? And it's like that frames the experience. It's not just when you sit down with your hamburger. Like it's everything. It's when you go into the bathroom and it's either clean or it's not. And when and the one you remember, unfortunately, is when it's not. So it's every single interaction. It's how customers feel about every single interaction with your brand or your organization. And what I think is particularly interesting about the education industry is that you have a lot of customers. It isn't just the students, right? You've got parents, you've got teachers, you've got bus drivers, you've got a lot of people in your world that are customers. Maybe you don't call them customers, but that is that is who they are. And one of the challenges, therefore, is having to create experiences for all of them and make sure that they all work together. I just thought about this, and I'll send this to you, Kyle, so you can link to it. But I wrote an article once about a snow day at my kids' school. Okay. And the letter that we got from the principal, and what had happened was they had canceled school the night before because there was projections of this big storm coming through. And of course, you could probably guess, we got no snow at all. And everybody was irritated that they had canceled school. And so the principal sent this letter, and I thought this letter was fantastic because it explained the process of deciding when to call a snow day. And it explained that there were so many people involved. And the first thing, which I had never thought of, the first question they ask is, are our bus drivers going to be able to get to their bus? Because if they can't, the rest of the system falls apart, right? And the kids can't get to school. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about the bus drivers. And I just thought that this letter was such a great way of detailing that we have lots of constituents. It's not just you parents, right? We know you parents think that you're number one, but like we got lots of them. And yes, you are part of it, but here's how it works. And it was really eye-opening to me. And I felt the reason I wrote about it was because I feel like organizations more broadly need to do a better job of communicating. And sometimes, I believe a lot of times, when we communicate more fully with our audience, with our customers, with our constituents, then we get the buy-in that we need, even if it's not the answer that they want, right? The principal wasn't able to say, just kidding, it's not a snow day. So we never got the answer that we wanted, but we got an explanation that made us say, all right, our first impressions of this decision-making process were probably wrong. It was actually really well thought out, and it just didn't work out this time. And, I find this all the time that customers in business, they're willing to forgive mistakes. It's what happens next that matters, right? Exactly. It's how you apologize. It's what you do. It's how you make it right. And when you do that well, they forget about the mistake. They don't care. They care that you reacted in the right way.
Education's a lot in any industry is data driven. When you think of really just defining what customer experience is, and it's these feelings and every interaction, how do you quantify and actually understand what feelings various people and various stakeholders within your organization are feeling so that we can be able to successfully put systems in place to consider all of these various people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to try to translate it to education, but I may need your help with that. Let me tell you about it from a corporate business perspective, and then we can sort of play with how this would affect schools. So like anything, if you want to get resources for something, you need to show how it affects the bottom line. Especially when you're trying to appeal to a CEO or a CFO, they want to know, show me the money, right? And so when it comes to customer experience, what I love about it is it affects both sides of the profit equation. It affects revenue and costs. So how does it affect revenue? Well, when customers love the experience, they come back more often, they spend more money, they are loyal to you for longer, and they refer you to other people. So all of these things affect revenue.
Exactly.
On the cost side, the biggest thing that customer experience does is it reduces your support costs, because people only call customer service when they have a problem. But if they're not having any problems, then they don't have to call customer service, right? And in most corporations, if you think about your credit card company or your cell phone company, each call is going to cost between $7 and $10. That's fairly typical. And I know it sounds crazy, but you sort of take the expense of the technology, the expense of the agent and their salary and all that sort of stuff. It equates to about $7 to $10 per call. Okay. And so one of the things that I did at Discover when I ran the website was we looked for ways to solve problems digitally, or we looked for ways where digital was actually causing a phone call, right? So something breaks on the website. What do? They call. If I fix that on the website, I can save hundreds, maybe thousands of calls on a weekly basis. And you start to do that math at $7 to $10 a piece, and you're like, wow, this is actually worth a lot. And so that's how you value this, right? You can't value people's feelings. That the soft stuff is there, but you value it by saying how many times do they come back, and how often are they bringing a friend with them. So as I'm thinking about this out loud, this probably translates better to maybe a for-profit school or a private school more so than a public school, because a public school, people may not have a choice. They're coming to you whether they want to.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you could start to measure it with things like, well, how many complaints do we get from parents? And because we know that parents are loud. And if we're getting fewer complaints, that allows us to do other things with our time than have to answer complaints. And that's valuable. And we may not be able to put a dollar value on it, but we can put some value on our time and on the resources that we have to allocate. We can look at our teachers and our bus drivers and our custodians and all these people, and we can look at retention and how often how are we able to reduce turnover? Because every time we bring on a new teacher or a new custodian or a new bus driver, we've got to train them. We've got to onboard them. There's cost associated with that. And if we can do that less, we're saving money. So I do think there are some parallels that you can bring into school, even though it's not going to work exactly like a corporation.
When you think of experience, what would be your number one hack or step for someone that's listening right now to start to increase or enhance their experience starting, let's say, tomorrow?
Yeah, this one's easy. It is to become a customer of your own business. And so what that means is you got to get out from behind the desk. You got to get out from behind the computer, and you have to experience your business, your school, as your customer would, which means sit in the classroom for an hour-long lecture. And as your back starts hurting because that chair is really hard and uncomfortable, guess what? It's probably hurting for other people too, right? You don't know that if you've never sat in the darn chair. It's very similarly. I did a lot of work a couple of years ago in the dental industry, and one of the things that I learned about dentists is that they almost always have their office in the back of the building, and there's a separate entrance. And part of the reason they do this, it's very strategic, is that if their first appointment's at 9 a.m. and they're kind of stumbling in at 9:01, they don't want to come in the front door and have all the people waiting, see them late, right? So they go in the back door. Fine, that makes sense. But I always encourage dentists and doctors, et cetera, to walk in the front door occasionally. Because if you don't walk in the front door, then you don't see the fingerprints on the door. You don't see that we haven't updated the magazine rack since before COVID. You don't see that there's no coffee in the coffee maker, or there's no pencils in the pencil jar. And so if you don't ever look at your practice through the lens of your patient, you never really understand their experience. So similar with a school is, when's the last time as a principal that you rode the bus to school? I think you should. I think you should get in the bus and ride it with the kids and see what it's like. Is it loud? Is it bumpy? Is it comfortable? Is it fun? Is it, you have no idea until you go do it yourself, and have your whole team do it too. So every part of the experience of going to school. When's the last time you ate in the cafeteria? Or does the teacher's lounge have better food than the student cafeteria? I don't know, but just an example. But anytime you can experience it as your customer, your eyes are going to open up to just tons and tons of opportunities. And this eventually becomes habit. So like when I go out to dinner, I'm noticing everything around me. I remember I went out to lunch one time with a colleague, and he was asking me a very similar question to this. What is this customer experience thing? How do you define it? And I said, dude, did you see when we sat down at this booth that the top of the booth was dusty? And he's like, no. I'm like, I did, because I'm paying attention to that.
Wow.
And you know what? The manager of this restaurant should be paying attention to it too, because does a dusty booth make me hungry? Does it make me feel like this place is clean? Does it make me ask questions like, are they cleaning the kitchen? Are they washing the vegetables? Like, you don't want your customers' minds going there. But again, you've got to, so I view everything from a customer perspective. The hardest thing to do, though, is to do that in your own business. And so if you can do that, that's the biggest hack that I would give you.
So Dan, personal question. Is it hard for you to go places, because you're the customer experience guy? So you probably look at this in every single place that you go now.
I do, but I like it too. I enjoy it. If you follow a lot of my social media, most of what I post are examples of cool experiences, because they are all around us. Sometimes we don't take the time to notice them, but there's just little things. And so I take pictures all the time, and we're posting stuff that just, if it gives you an idea in your business or in your school, then I've done my job. One that I haven't posted yet, but I was just traveling overseas, and there was this restaurant that was kind of built like a 50s diner. And they had somehow taken like shells of classic cars and hollowed them out and put tables inside of them, so that when you sat down to eat, you were like sitting inside of a 57 Chevy. And I was like, that is so cool. That's such a neat way to design your restaurant, right? And so what could we learn from that? Well, you're not in the restaurant business, but maybe it sparks some idea for you about seating and how we might be more creative, or we could make things more comfortable or more fun or more colorful, or whatever you're going for. And so I am always actually looking for positive vibes, because that's what my brand is about. And yeah, I find some pretty bad stuff too. And sometimes I will, I don't like to out the brands that are doing it poorly, but sometimes I will anonymize it, and I'll write, what can we learn from this kind of a blog. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing that I am attuned to it. It's just who I am at this point. And I enjoy it.
That's interesting that you say that. And I was at Waffle House and I wrote about this. It's maybe 2 or 3 months ago in Atlanta. And I wrote about going to Waffle House, and I got my food and I was getting ready to leave. And I was talking to the guy as he was getting ready to bring me up. And I was like, it's interesting. Waffle House, you guys are a $1 billion company. Like, why don't you guys just get digital POS systems rather than writing it down and using a calculator? And he looked back at me. He was like, it's just a Waffle House thing. And then I loved that. And I was like, I wrote an article about how, in this digital world and everything's changing, staying true to your mission, and how schools can stay true to their mission and ensure that their employees and the experiences that you get are true to your brand. Yeah. And it's so interesting that you talk about that. I guess what differentiates a good experience versus an experience where it needs some growth?
Well, so I think to unpack that, you have to ask yourself what your goal is, right? So in business, my belief is that the goal of a great experience is to get your customer to come back and to tell someone else about you. I think the sharing part is really, really important. As a marketer for 20 years, I learned very quickly, word of mouth marketing is the most powerful form of marketing there is. It's better than any advertisement, any marketing campaign. If someone else is talking about you in a positive way, that's going to bring you more business. How do you think I get on most of the stages that I go on? Somebody has seen me speak and tells someone else about it and says, you got to hire Dan. That's how I get hired, right? And so, so when that's the goal, it's not, you asked about what's good, what's the difference between a good experience and a bad experience. And I will get to that. There's also what's the difference between a good experience and a remarkable experience. And remarkable means worthy of remark, worthy of telling somebody about. Because what I would argue is the vast majority of the experiences that we have are neither good or bad. They're just ordinary. They just happen, right? And so we shrug, and we're not disappointed. We're not excited. We're just nothing. Like, we ordered our food, we got our food. Okay, right? Nothing, nothing remarkable about it at all. Obviously, I think if you go back to my definition of experience, then the difference between a good experience and a bad experience, if you filter it through how customers feel, it's going to be, what is the feeling that they have? What's the emotion that they have, right? And is it a positive emotion or is it a negative emotion? And if it's evoking a negative emotion, then it's time to fix it. There's a whole debate in the customer experience space, and I've written about this, about whether we should focus on fixing the pain points or on elevating the positive points. And my answer is yes. You've got to do both. You got to work on both of them. The pain points are really important because ultimately customers do have patience, but ultimately, if you have this whole death by 1,000 paper cuts thing, at some point, I think we've all been there with our cable company or our cell phone company, where we're like, that's it. I've had it. I'm moving to another company. Even though you know that other company is going to be just as bad, you're like, I've had it. Forget about you people. I'm not working with you anymore. And that's after one paper cut, a second paper cut, a third paper cut, a 10th paper cut, a 100th paper cut. And finally, we never know when it is, but at some point, that's it. We're done. On the flip side, when we can add these little, not expensive, not operationally complex, not highly technical, but these little bumps up to the experience, what I call the difference between ordinary and extraordinary. When we do that at scale and we continue to do that over and over again, it's like the opposite of the death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's like, oh, that was cool. Hey, that was fun. Oh, I like this. And then at some point you say, I really love this brand, because every time I interact with them, I feel good. I have a positive reaction to it, right? And then usually what happens next is I go tell somebody about it. And so now the brand has not only made a loyal customer out of me, but they've, now they get to work with Kyle too, because I just told Kyle about it. So that's really the key difference. And again, if you go back to what I said earlier, most experiences are just ordinary. The millennials call it meh. My teenagers call it mid. You can call it whatever you want. It's the same thing. It's not worthy of even discussing. Exactly. And so that's usually where you want to look, is because if most experiences are like that the difference between ordinary and extraordinary does not have to be a lot. It's really just a little bit of a step up.
So what are some of these step ups? I know you talk about simple, practical, and inexpensive ways to be able to enhance your overall experience. What are some of those small things that we can do as business owners or even school leaders that can just enhance the experience?
So one of my favorite ones to turn to is the first letter in my WISER methodology, which is the W, which is witty. And witty is just, it's not about being funny necessarily, because, humor can be dangerous, but it's about having fun. And it is about showing the personality and the humanness behind your company, your brand, your school, right? And so think about, I often think about the teachers that I had growing up and how you thought they lived at the school, right? Like, you didn't know anything about them. They weren't people. They were just teachers in front of a classroom. You didn't know if they were married, if they had kids, if they had hobbies, and those human elements create connectivity, create relationships, And I think, and I haven't been in school in a very long time, so maybe this has changed, but that's a small way to start to enhance the experience, is to start bringing in things about you that people wouldn't know. In fact, if you go to my website and you go to the About page, I have intentionally put in 15 random facts about Dan that are not about me as a speaker, They're not reasons why you should hire me. They're just random facts about me. And what's funny is so many times when I have a call with a prospect, they will bring up one of those 15 things. And I know they've been on my website and I know they've read it and I've piqued their interest. And now we have a conversation topic. We have something in common and we can, and that's a connection, right? And once you have that connection point, you can build off of it. But witty is also, the fun part is, and this is where I think schools can do a ton of stuff. The way I define witty is that it is about using language to your advantage every time you communicate. So when we use language, which could be verbal, it could be written, it could be on video, it could be, it could be in your email signature, in your voicemail message, in your out of office message, whatever, on your business card. We use communicate, we use words all the time. Every one of those is an opportunity to just show some personality and have a little fun. So again, because I practice what I preach, if you go to my website, go click on the privacy policy. I know you're like, why would I want to read a privacy policy? Because mine's actually fun to read. Because if you have to have a privacy policy, which you do, it's a required part of the business, why not have fun? Like my contracts that I sign with clients, they're really fun to read. They will make you laugh. Are they legally sound? Yes, but they will make you laugh. Because why not? Let's have fun. And so I think that especially teachers, I think they're just born to do that, right? They are naturally engaging, interactive people, and students are going to learn better when they're having fun. I don't know if you've ever met, there's a wonderful Hall of Fame speaker named Steve Spangler. And he's been on Ellen a bunch of times. Yeah. And he was a science teacher. Mm-hmm. And his whole thing was making science fun. And he's the guy that one of the very first YouTube videos ever to go viral was a guy putting Mentos in a Diet Coke bottle. And that was Steve Spangler. And because he wanted to show people the science behind that. And so think about how powerful that is. I'll tell you, when I went to business school, my very favorite professor was this German guy with a really thick accent who taught statistics. Now, most people, when they go to business school, are like, they don't want to go, like statistics is not the class they're looking forward to. But I am telling you, he had a lecture hall of 300 people literally rolling in the aisles laughing because this guy had so much fun. And he had so much fun with statistics. And so it became this class that people looked forward to going to. And that's the difference. That's the ordinary versus extraordinary, right? Stats is not going to be a class that most people look forward to going to unless you have Professor Schmetters as your teacher. And then you're going to look forward to going to it. And so that's what, I know this is a long answer to a short question, but this is what I would focus on is having fun and being witty and using language to our advantage. It's not telling jokes, but it is about being clever and being cute because people appreciate it. One last example, I'll give you this, another digital example. If you ever go to a URL that's broken, you get to what is called in industry speak a 404 error page. I don't know why it's called a 404 error page. I've never studied that. But what I know is that most people don't have any idea what 404 stands for. So when you get to an error page and it says 404 error page, it's not particularly helpful, right? Because you don't even know what to do next. Error pages, or when mistakes happen, are a great opportunity to create a fun experience. So again, on Dan's webpage, if you go to a bad page, you're going to get to an error page that makes you smile. It's also going to be helpful because it's going to say, hey, let me get you back to the homepage because you obviously didn't mean to come here, right? So it's helpful and it's fun and it makes you smile. And so if you think about the perspective of when I say every single interaction, think about how many interactions that students have with adults at school every day. There must be on any given day, it must be 2-3 dozen, right? Exactly. Those are all your opportunities. There's tons of them.
That's good. Now, that is the W, and I know it's a framework. Can you share the rest of the framework and how maybe we can have examples and parallels to driving in schools?
Absolutely, yeah. So the I is for being immersive. And immersive is, think about the experiences that you remember as a kid. You just feel them in your bones because they've stayed with you for so long. Chances are they are either going to be as a result of hitting one of your five senses, taste, smell, sight, hearing, touch, or hitting one of your emotions, because that's what memories are made of. So you asked me about my mom's cooking, and I can still smell her pot roast coming out of the oven. Like I know that exact smell. I can smell the seasonings. I know how the kitchen smelled. And that is a memory that I'll always have. So immersive is about trying to appeal to one of the five senses or to our emotions. So in a classroom, think about how you might use some of the senses that are not typical. Think about how you might use smell in a classroom. Think about how you might use taste or sound in a classroom that is different from normal, and you will immediately get people's attention. I tell a story on stage about going to a movie theater with my daughter. And for a little while, I was playing around with scent. And so I actually started bringing a scent diffuser to my speeches, and I piped in the scent of popcorn so that I tried to put the audience into the movie theater with me, right? Wow. And when you smell the popcorn, now you feel like you're there, right? And so, again, what could teachers do that are similar to that? The S is about being shareable. And this is about creating moments very intentionally where people are going to pull out their phone, take a picture or a video, and tell somebody about it. And so especially if you are a private school or you're a for-profit school and you depend on getting more customers in the door, you want people talking about you. You want people saying, I love going to school here, or look what happened to me today. This was really cool. I did a lot of work with for a while with professional schools. So think, training for salons or for repair shops or a lot of the blue collar technical stuff. And so we talked a lot about these moments where, somebody does something for the first time, right? The skill that they're learning, they finally do it. How do we capture that moment so that we take a picture of it and we tell somebody about it? Because that student celebrating that moment is going to get other students to say, wait, I'd like to celebrate that same moment, right? And so when we think about what people share, teachers, bus drivers, custodians, principals, all of you, you do this in your real life, right? You pull out your phone. Nobody tells you to do it. You just do it. You something happens and you're like, oh, and you grab it. You grab your phone because you want to take a picture or a video. We can strategically create experiences that we know people will pull out their phones and capture. And so it's just about designing them in such a way where that's the response. And then extraordinary is about what we talked about earlier. It is about taking ordinary things and just leveling them up a little bit. And I always say, you don't have to spend more money. You don't have to make it more operationally complex, and you don't have to invest in technology or AI to do it. You just have to do things slightly differently. One of my favorite examples that I share on stage and in my book is about going to a restaurant and celebrating your birthday. And typically what will happen is they'll bring out a slice of cake and a candle and they'll sing happy birthday to you. And that's a nice gesture. And it's especially nice when the cake is free. But it's not really extraordinary because so many restaurants do it. And so very rarely have I found anybody who's had a friend come up to them and say, you'll never believe what happened to me last night. I went out to a restaurant and it was my birthday, and wait for it, they came out with a slice of cake and a candle. Right? No, nobody's done that because we've all experienced that. And so that's a great sign that while it's a nice experience, it's an ordinary experience. So then I show a picture from Fleming's Steakhouse where they bring out a box of 4 handmade chocolates, and it's sitting on a plate with happy birthday spelled out in cocoa powder. And instead of a candle, there's a sparkler. And a sparkler makes all the difference. First of all, when you take a picture of a sparkler, it's super cool because you get the individual sparks in your picture. And so when I tell this story on stage, I always ask the audience, no matter what industry they're in, so I'll ask your audience as educators to use it as a metaphor, to think about what is your candle? What is something that you do that is nice, that your students like, but you've probably been doing it that way every year for a long, long time, or you've probably been doing it that way because you saw another school do it that way. And how do we take that candle and turn it into a sparkler? A sparkler is not more expensive. A sparkler is not more operationally complex. You light it the same way. The sparkler does not require more technology or more AI. It's just that it's different from a candle, and therefore it's better. It stands out because it's more unique. And so that's really about what being extraordinary is just finding those little tiny moments where we can say, wow, it's always been blue. What if it was yellow? And so it's different. Everybody else is, you ever notice every bank in America, their color is blue because somebody did some research that said blue is about power and strength and, whatever. And I loved when I worked at Discover, our color was orange. So we were like the only non-blue bank. And so that's what extraordinary is. And finally, responsive is, and I think schools are really good at this. Responsive is about being there when your customers need you, whether they have questions, whether they're giving you compliments, or whether they have complaints. And that can come in a lot of different forms because people will give you feedback in a lot of different forms. They might write you a letter, email, write a bad review, post on social media. They might walk into your office and talk to you. And any of those opportunities, you have a chance to be responsive. And when you are, people remember it. That's what I said earlier, where even if you make a mistake, what happens next is what is critical. The way that you respond is what's critical. That's what people will remember.
If you had 60 seconds to share a message with every educator, every listener that listens to this, that will help them enhance their experiences, whether it's in the classroom, in the boardroom, or in whatever rooms that they occupy, what would you say?
I would say, first of all, thank you all for what you do. You're amazing people. We need more of you in the world. I would say to remember that the lesson that you're teaching today, that you've taught every year for the last 18 years, it's your students' first time getting this lesson. And that is such a completely different perspective. And so if you imagine every experience as being someone's first time, you want to make that first time amazing, remarkable, memorable in some way. And it's so easy to get stuck in, you remember the old Dunkin' Donuts commercial with the guy that wakes up at 4 a.m. and he says, time to make the donuts. That's what happens when we do the same thing 18 years in a row. And if we can take that and we can just remember that that little kid sitting in front of you or big kid sitting in front of you, it's their first time, you're going to present that lesson in a completely different way.
Dan, thank you so much. How can people find you? How can we engage and support your work, especially your new book coming out?
Well, thank you. It's out. It's out. The second edition of Becoming the Experience Maker is out. And it goes through that whole wiser methodology, tons of examples. But I'm not a hard guy to find online. Just Google my name and you'll find my website. You'll find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, anywhere you want to come hang out. I'd love to talk to you. And I appreciate the support, man.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Contagious Culture podcast. One of the things that really stuck out to me today is how to position your candle and go from lighting the candle to being able to create moments and sparks that will transform the experience of every student, every teacher, every parent, every stakeholder that is a part of the ecosystem that you've been called to be able to empower. One of the questions that I want to ask you this week is, what type of culture am I spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next.